Hello, True Health Seeker, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. I'm excited for you to hear today's interview with Kellyann Andrews. She's back on the show with us. She's been here for a few episodes teaching about heavy metal detoxification and how to alkalize the body and how to test our pH. She's shared so much wonderful advice in past episodes, so we're continuing our great conversation with her about detoxification and promotion of optimal health. To promote your optimal health, I have wonderful news. I just heard from my favorite CBD company, MedTerra CBD. That's medterracbd.com. I interviewed the founder a while back. You can find that episode by going to learntruehealth.com and search CBD to find my interview with the founder of MedTerra CBD. He shares how they source their hemp to make sure that it's organic and the different processes it goes through to extract the CBD in the healthiest way possible. Now, it is not a whole hemp plant extract, meaning you will pass a drug test if you take it because there's no THC in it. It is pure CBD. I've used a lot of different companies trying out different types of CBD from cannabis plants and from hemp plants. I really like their CBD. I don't suffer, fortunately, with chronic pain, but I do notice that for me, it really calms me down. Sometimes I get really wound up after a great interview and I need to wind down a little bit. It really calms me down, and I could see their CBD being a fantastic replacement for alcohol. If you're the type of person that wants to come home and have a glass of wine at night, I can see this being an absolutely very healthy replacement because, as we know, alcohol is a poison, it's a toxin for the liver, and over time it does do liver damage. It also drains our resources and drains our minerals in our body, whereas CBD is so healthy for the nervous system. And that's something that we've discussed in our episodes and our CBD interviews. So you can go to learntruehealth.com, type in CBD, learn more about CBD. But if you're interested in it for pain management, for sleep, or for stress reduction, then check it out. Go to medterracbd.com. and use the promo code they gave us just for December. It ends December 31st. When you purchase $50 or more, they're going to throw in a free 250 milligram tincture. So you get a free bottle, which is so cool because you can throw that in your purse or in your car, or you can gift it to a friend. So for every purchase, you're going to receive an additional bottle by using the coupon code LTH Holiday. Our normal coupon code is LTH, and that gives you the listener discount. And then right now we're getting this additional promotion, which is LTH Holiday, all one word. So go to medterracbd.com and put in the coupon code LTH Holiday. Check it out if you want to try and see what's the hype, what's CBD all about. It gives me the same amount of relief that a glass of wine would, but it doesn't create a buzz in your head. It doesn't make you stoned in any way. It doesn't make you feel high in any way. It just is wonderfully calming for the nervous system. And a lot of people have reported that it's really helped them with their pain and also with their anxiety and also with their sleep, which is excellent. Just wonderful news. Thank you so much for being a listener. Thank you so much for sharing the Learn True Health podcast with those you love so that we can help as many people as possible. If you want to join the email list, go to learntruehealth.com, wait for the pop-up. It happens after about 5 seconds. Put in your email. I promise not to spam you. I just send a few emails a month. And also join the Facebook group. It's an active, wonderful community. We're all helping each other, answering each other's health questions. If you just want a tribe of really great and positive people that love helping each other, then you absolutely will love the Learn True Health Facebook group. So you can just search Learn True Health in Facebook or go to learntruehealth.com/group, and you will be able to join us. I can't wait to see you there. Awesome. So remember, medterracbd.com, using the coupon code LTH Holiday, get your free bottle. and let me know what you think. You can chat about it with all the other listeners in the Facebook group, or you can email me, ashley@learntruehealth.com. I'd love to hear from you. Enjoy today's interview. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 396. I'm very happy to have back on the show with us Kellyann Andrews, who, this is your 5th time being here, Kellyann. You were in episode 292, 293, 329, and 330. Kellyann is the co-founder of Platinum Energy Systems, and her website is platinumenergysystems.ca.
Yes.
I love we call it the PES for short, right?
Yes.
Love the PES. Many listeners have, I think like over 60 or something listeners have purchased a PES and have been sharing it with their friends and family. I've shared it with many of my friends with outstanding results. Really interesting results. I originally, and please listeners, go back and check out the first episode 292, because I share my serendipitous experience of how Kellyann and I met shortly after I interviewed Dr. Klinghardt, and I was on a mission to figure out how to detox my body of heavy metals, because I realized that my liver, my chronic liver inflammation was one of the problems was heavy metal toxicity. And I was looking at all the healthy things I could do to remove heavy metals in the safest way possible. And Dr. Klinghardt says in our interview that this ionic foot bath is a thing he highly recommends. And I thought, man, I really want to get one of those. And then that's when I met Kellyann, and it was just like perfect timing. And it turned out that Kellyann, your system is the same one that Dr. Klinghardt uses in his clinics to help very ill patients regain their health through removing these heavy metals in a safe way. So I started using the PES. It has to be over a year that I've been using it now. I should go back and look at the exact date I started using it. And I noticed right away really positive results for myself. My liver inflammation went away. I no longer taste heavy metals in my mouth. I was having issues with, my immune system was reacting to the heavy metals as well. And I'm not having those issues anymore. So it is a shotgun approach, because I also use the sunlight and sauna, and I soak in magnesium, and I eat chlorella, and I take supplements, and I exercise, and I juice, and I eat 8 cups of vegetables a day. And, I do all kinds of things for my health. So I'm not saying it's just one thing, but I did notice that what really helped is when I added the PES system to my life, I got great results. So this episode, though, is not strictly about the PES system. I just, in preferencing the wonderful guest we have on today, I wanted to share that I love the work that you do, Kellyann. I love the PES, and I know that my listeners who also have one would agree, as I've heard from many of them, that it makes a big difference. But today you're here to talk about something that I think instills a lot of fear in people. There's a lot of fear around 5G, heavy metals, and Wi-Fi, and EMF exposure, especially when we start to look into it and realize that there is a really big problem. And that's something that Dr. Klinghardt talked about in our interview. He talked about how he's able to reverse autism, and he does it regularly. And one thing he says is the first thing he does with autistic children is he gets them away from Wi-Fi, because the Wi-Fi vibrates at a certain frequency that vibrates the heavy metals in their brain. And it's like putting their brain in a microwave. And it like short circuits the brain. And when he removes autistic children from Wi-Fi, 100% removes them out of Wi-Fi, there's a difference in their behavior. And then he gets them on a gentle heavy metal detox. And that's his next step, including the PES. Just recently, I had a friend come over who has a son who has developmental delays. And it's very difficult to understand what he's saying. He's 4 years old, and when he speaks, you really want to understand him because he has such enthusiasm, but really I rarely understand a word he says. And we have video footage, his mom filmed it. After one session in the PS, he spoke clearly, and the mom was beside herself. She had never heard him speak so clearly. He was able to communicate, and it was just amazing. That was after for his first session. So I've seen wonderful things happen when we help the body to pull heavy metals out and detox. Now, Kellyann, I know that you want to make sure that we start today's interview by setting a tone, not a fear-based tone, but a tone of hope and bringing in actionable steps and showing the listeners the things that we can do in our daily life to support our body's ability to heal itself and to protect our body. So I want to make sure that you get a chance to set this tone, because I know that you don't want to be fear-based, and you want to make sure the listeners feel that they can do something, that they're in the driver's seat of their health.
Exactly. I've watched, as we all have, and listened to so many, podcasts, and especially around health issues. And there's a lot of them that just really portray almost a doomsday kind of mentality and mindset. By the end of it, it's sort of like watching a horror show. You just don't feel good. That's where I love being with you, because you just set such a different tone and really focus on the solution orientation and what people can do to decrease the fear, because the fear has everything to do with hyperacidifying your body, causing a sympathetic nervous system overdrive response, a fight and flight, a trap feeling, you're in the box and there's no doors, all that kind of thing. And I think there's just a huge amount of that going on in the world today, and people are just stressed beyond their capacity, and people are having meltdowns on not only physical levels, which we're seeing if anybody ever has to go to emergency. It's just, the poor people who work in the emergency rooms now, they need to get treatment almost because they're so overwhelmed by all that's coming at them. But it's not just on that level, it's on the emotional and the mental level as well. And so that's what, in this podcast, I want to give your listeners the insights of what I have. I was the field biologist at age 5, 6, collecting the tadpole eggs to watch them change to tadpoles and then to frogs. So I've always had a watcher kind of interest and curiosity and fascination. And so during the journey of my own detoxification of heavy metals and other toxic content, then expanding that into other practitioners and their patients, and then family members, and just sort of the ripple effect outward, and then working with medical clinics all over North America, I began to see a pattern occurring in what was happening. Like the platinum energy system seemed to somehow be hitting a reset button for people. And that in itself fascinated me. But what occurred as we went through this journey of watching people's recovery was the pattern that started to emerge. Was what I watched was when they had their sessions, initially they released a lot of lymphatic clog up. So this fatty substance, sometimes it's almost looked like molten lava being released on the surface of the water, would come out. And until that content came out, the heavy metals didn't. But when that content came out, like in the previous podcast, I told about a woman who came to us in a total state of dementia, didn't know where she was, and I don't know who she was, but she released like an inch or two of goop into the basin that looked like chicken soup stuck in the fridge overnight. But once that content came out, boom, out came some other content, in which then we began to realize that all of these patients were suffering from some version of what the Chinese call stagnation, where there was a lack of flow of energy, and that the various circulatory systems in the body were clogging up, whether it was a systemic, entire broad view of like the arterial system, or whether it was a localized issue of like sinus congestion. So wherever the congestion was, then that's where the issue was primarily showing up. But I always use the analogy of an aquarium, and if it's in one corner of the aquarium, it's through the whole aquarium. So then what we began to see was just like if you have a lack of exercise, the blood and the lymph don't flow, and that is so vital. But in behind the stagnation was a high level of pH. And so the things that we saw in the pattern of the client's history was that they all came to us usually with mold, microbe, and parasite issues, infections. But behind that was heavy metals, and behind that was an exposure to EMF. And that combination, along with high acidity, was clogging up the lymph system. In the podcast, we talked about previously the issue with copper and nickel. So the listeners can just go back there and begin to see how those are complicating human physiology. But in our testing, what we did was, we were fascinated to see what was being released and what was the content. So when we did the water analysis, we ran the system with no feed, and then we ran it with 4 different patients. So we compared the control with no feed in the water as opposed to patients. And so, for example, in terms of lead, one of the things that we're seeing is just the majority of people are coming to us with lead, mercury, and aluminum toxicity are the 3 primary ones. So in the control, what we saw was lead was 1.7, but the last patient who was a commercial artist, she had 30 units of lead released in one session. And so then we looked at the blood. And so we had a 50-year-old male come to us who had the flu, and his pH was 6 at the beginning, but at the end it was 7.5. And he released a lot of heavy metals, but you could see in the photographs of the blood that he had total stagnation in his blood. His blood cells were all stacked together. But yet after the session, they opened up and started to move, and you could actually see the difference in the red blood cells.
You mean live blood cell analysis, just for people who don't know what it means to,
yes,
in the photos of his blood, that, and I've had live blood cell analysis done back in 99. It was fascinating. And I wish it was more readily used, because I think it would be it's so convincing to go to the doctor's office. They take a prick of your blood and they put it under a microscope, and then they project it onto a computer, and you can see right there your red blood cells and the health of your red blood cells. You see so much just by looking. When red blood cells are stuck together, they get stuck together like a Congo line. And you can see the way that they're stuck together. They're not functioning correctly. They're not able to fully release oxygen and grab onto what they need to grab onto to pull, to take stuff away from the cells. They're not able to really bring the nutrients to the cell. The blood isn't able to work correctly. So you can see it's like sludge. You can see big fat globules. You can see candida floating around. And you can see how the white blood cells are responding. And it's interesting, if you eat a cheeseburger and an hour later go and get your live blood cell analysis done, you can see your blood turns to sludge, and there's big globs of fat floating around in your blood. And then if you do stuff like this kind of frequency work, I've seen live blood cell analysis done after like being on a beamer mat where they use specific frequencies, or a PES system, using the PES detox system, that the blood looks and acts differently just minutes after, like before and after the sessions. And then it lasts. It's a lasting effect that lasts all day, but you see that the red blood cells are no longer clumped together, that the cells are more viscous, everything's moving and able to function correctly.
And you know what makes that difference, Ashley? Electricity.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens with all diseases, and this is why the photographs were so fabulous, because it showed what the Chinese called that stagnation, which is what you were just talking about, the blood cells all stuck together.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason they were stuck together is because they had no electricity. And so once the heavy metals were removed, now the blood completely opened up and moved. It was just so beautiful. I mean, another artist looked at it and she said, I don't know anything about blood, but she said this top picture, which was the picture of them all stuck together, like, as you said, salmon roe or salmon eggs. She said, that's a picture of chaos. And then she saw the bottom picture after the session, and after a series of sessions, she said, my God, that's the picture of harmony. And that's why I want to bring this topic in, because I'm going to show you why that is occurring in terms of heavy metals and EMF.
Now, to clear up a confusion, EMF is electromagnetic frequency, and you're saying that the energy from a PS, for example, is like it's a positive, it's a healing frequency, but that the EMF we get from being around electronics is a harmful frequency.
Yeah, and I'm going to go into full detail about that just a little later on.
Okay. Good.
But there's just to mention the last one, because this was really significant, was we then tested urine, or we a medical clinic that we were working with had 2 patients that tested the urine, and neither of these patients had any intervention, which is really interesting before, because that's an unusual case. But the first male had lead at 23. And after 6 sessions had a 50% reduction, but lead on the second male was at 79, which was an astronomical score.
Wow.
And after 10 sessions released 50%. But what we watched was how, the pH changed in all of those cases with all of those patients. Now, what's interesting about lead, I don't know if you realize this, but I was quite shocked when I checked into it. Lead pipes, at least in Canada, were not outlawed until 1975.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is so close to, where we live now. I mean, it's not that many years ago. But no lead soldering in the pipes wasn't outlawed till 86.
So many of us could be living in homes with lead pipes or lead soldering.
Exactly. And the person that released the 30 units of lead into the basin in one session, she was a commercial artist and did stained glass. What do you use to hold the glass together? Lead soldering.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you could see it. So now we had another patient that was sent to us from a clinic. Now she was in her 50s and she had Lyme, and she had really severe pain in her face. And she said the pain in her face was almost at a constant 5 or 6, but it had spikes up to 10. And she felt very nauseated, and her pH was 6. And she had had a lot of dental fillings and a lot of dental work done. And when they tested her, she had high levels of mercury, lead, and aluminum. But she said, and we see this often with heavy metals, because you see heavy metals in the body, because they are heavy, of course, gravity takes them down to the feet. She said when she walked on her feet, she felt like she was walking on glass, and her whole body was tight. And her description of her own body was that she felt like she was constipated through her whole body, and her ankles were swollen with edema. Well, of course, heavy metals, when they join together, make a perfect log jam beaver dam, and so then they totally create, the flow of blood through the body to be log jammed, and then of course it just builds up and becomes edema. But she said that her brain felt like a veil was in front of her all the time, and she had a very poor level of memory at the time. They discovered that she lived in a house with mold, and she actually had to leave the house and move and leave all her possessions behind. We have many patients that have that, where they can't even take anything out of their house because it's all contaminated. Mm-hmm. But here's the key, is that she grew up on a farm with well water, and the iron content was so immense that she couldn't wear white because it would stain all her white clothes
Oh
orange.
my gosh.
So there's where her original contact was. But after she had a session in a series, she released those heavy metals, and she said that her water smelled like iron, and her feet weren't sore anymore and they were lighter, and she could feel the difference in her feet, that she didn't have that stagnation occurring anymore. And I mean, her energy levels soar. But the greatest thing was to listen to her, like before and after. And that's what I just absolutely love, is all these people who are liberated. I mean, she sounded so joyful and perky. She sounded like a chirping robin. Now, when you talked about Dr. Klinghardt before, he is very keenly focused, of course, as you say, on the electromagnetic sensitivities of people. And he ends up with people that are so extreme in the sensitivity that a lot of these people, have a hard time detoxifying because they go into overwhelm so easily. But there is a huge correlation with electromagnetic frequencies affecting them with those high metals in their body. And they all seem to have, all the ones that come to us from Dr. Klinghardt's clinics, is they all have that mold exposure and the heavy metals. There's a huge correlation there. And so the recovery started to occur when the heavy metals were released. And so we just sort of watched this, pattern of, stagnation and hyperacidity disappear once these heavy metals came out of the body. And they're so affecting the central nervous system of the human body. I mean, the artist who had 30, units of lead released in the session, she came in walking on a cane. I mean, her mobility, she was just like a stiff robot when she came in. But I had to run out to the car to give her cane afterwards because she forgot. She forgot her cane. That was so funny. But I want to give you an example of a city, a small town actually, that's in the United States that will not be named. But in this city, and we won't name the company either, but there's a huge chemical company in this town. And this chemical company, as we know, is just the source of a lot of not only bad chemistry, but heavy metals. And also, of course, then, a lot of these companies are having to use, sophisticated technologies. And so they're a big emitter of electromagnetic frequencies. So in this town, they are the main employer in this town, and everybody in the town is either connected with it by being employed by them, or, family members employed, or somehow, there's a connection back to them. But the whole entire town is sick.
Mm.
So this clinic came to us, and with the, focus on detoxifying their people in the town. And so people started coming in for sessions to get detox with platinum energy, and that the patients all started having different recoveries in all different systems of the body. And so that was sort of a fascination. But if you go back to the concept of the heavy metals, the hyperacidity, and the stagnation, their symptoms are just showing up where the sites of stagnation are. So, for example, one woman who had a thyroid issue, so the glands and the organs of the bodies get clogged up with this content, and then of course they can't function properly. So once she started to detox and the heavy metals came out, her scores on her thyroid improved. Her brain, she said, felt like it was working better. She feels better in general and looks better. But what was interesting was that the men and women that are coming in, they're now thinking clearer, and they're not as cloudy or foggy. They're feeling lighter, and their feet are feeling lighter, and they're very, very relaxed. Now, I'm going to tie this all in with the science later as to why these people are experiencing these very specific symptoms to begin with, and then why the releases are related. And so the clinic told me that they're all leaving feeling revitalized, and things like joints aren't hurting. The joint pain is diminishing, and they're no longer got restless leg syndrome. I mean, how many people do you hear about restless leg syndrome? And that's hugely related to stagnation, heavy metals clogging up the arterial system in the legs. And neuropathy, we talked about that already. So here's an example. People, need to realize that, for example, we had a husband come to us who was a welder. So of course, a welder is dealing with metals all day, right? Well, his wife, when their blood tests were taken, when their urine challenge tests were done. Now, that's a really good point, by the way. People will go and have their blood tested for heavy metals. Now, it will show up an acute exposure in the blood, like if they just had something happen in, one of these mining disasters where, the wall breaks and all the content comes down into the city or into the water or whatever. So that's an acute exposure. But what happens when the people get it chronically is that they got to test the urine. And so when you test the urine, both the husband and wife were tested. She had as much heavy metals as he had because she washed his uniforms in the family laundry.
So? How did you figure that one out?
Well, because of the fact that I got this investigator mind, and so I was like, the fact that she had as much as him, and she didn't do the welding, and yet he did. There was some form of, pass it forward, which wasn't a good story. And so then I was like, I just asked her, are you washing his uniforms? And she said, yeah. And so then it was being put in with all the clothes, and it was just contaminating the next person.
And they both were very high.
They were very high in the metals that he was working with, in the exact metals he was working with. And so we see this a lot in industry where people are coming to us, I remember this one person who was working in a factory in Calgary, and it was pop cans, so aluminum. She was so full of aluminum, she was like off the chart, and she was totally debilitated. Absolutely debilitated. But as she started to unravel the extreme levels of heavy metals, her health started to rebound. So we had a stockbroker who came to us. Now I always ask people right up front, what is their industry? So that I can start to see where the toxicology issues are in their lives. So this man was a stockbroker. So boom, immediately up comes, okay, lots of exposure to electrical. I don't know if you've ever been in a stockbroker room, but they've got the band thing going across the ceiling that's telling what all of the numbers are. They're all in this small room with God knows how many computers going off at the same time, phones going off, everybody's on a cell phone walking around. It's just got to be an electrical nightmare in those kind of rooms. So what happened was 8 years before he came to us, he had a complete nervous system breakdown. And when they analyzed his metal levels, he had high mercury because he'd been having a lot of dental work done, plus he had a lot of lead. What had happened was that he had the experience of really strong current running through his entire body, but he said it created a violent sensation, and his heart was beating completely out of rhythm. And when he tested his pH before a session, it was 6. And I had him test his urine as well, and his urine was 5.5. And like norm, the blood should be 7.35 to 7.45. So we're seeing a huge correlation with these people with low levels of alkalinity, but high levels of acidity. So he has a series of sessions. Now he feels lighter, is more flexible. He released what I always jokingly say, which isn't so great really, but it's the mother load of heavy metals. But after this oily content came out, so he was all clogged up. So again, stagnation. So the lymph system gets all clogged up. Now, a lot of people are doing diets in which they're doing, a lot of animal protein, and they're also doing high fats. Well, it amazes me in our modern times that we don't learn from our history. But, the Predican diet, Predican himself didn't last on it, but, it clogs them up. And so they get clogged up in the lymphatic system. And we see this hugely, especially with the, we need protein. Granted, I agree. Absolutely. You really need protein way more than we're eating, all this carbs. But too much protein, especially from an animal source, and too much oil is like completely log jamming the lymphatic system. So that's, where with his heavy metal content and his his high levels of acidity, were hugely affecting him. So after a series of sessions and releasing these heavy metals, boing, his urine comes up to a 7, and so does his saliva. Now he's sleeping deeper. His energy levels up, his stamina is up, his mood is up, he feels mellow, and he's more present and alert. And wait to see how this ties in with the electrical system of the body and the EMF and all of that together. So I'm going to get to that, but I want people to understand there is a pattern here that's emerging. So now we have people that have a very high level of electromagnetic sensitivity. These people can't go near computers. They can't use phones, or especially cell phones. So we had a patient who was sent to us who, if she touched a wire, her heart would go into extreme palpitations. In other words, beat very, very fast. But the great thing was, and she knew how much heavy metal she had in her body, so she knew she couldn't go near anything electric. But once she released those heavy metals, a month later she could touch the wire and she had no heart palpitations. And she was so joyful because, people, when they get in these states of health, as you've seen and experienced, and, we've all experienced, is the trouble is when you get into what I call a low tide position, you become very fearful. And it's a now experience, but the human body, when not happy, gives very strong signals. And the trouble with the human thought form or mindset is that then you project that to be eternity, that you're always going to feel this. And if there's one message that I could get across today, is to realize it's just a moment in time. And the fact that it continues, if it's more than a moment in time, is because of the body is clogged up and it needs to release this content. But once you release the content, rejuvenation occurs. But in these states of debility, degeneration is occurring. But that is not an eternal position. It's just a temporary focus if you address the core cause.
I noticed that when I did, because I've taken the PS machine and used it with many of my friends, and I noticed that the first few sessions were thick black tar that when we were done the session, it would be very frothy, and it would be oily. And this is stuff that came out of their feet.
Yes.
What is it? What is this stuff that's coming out of our feet?
Yeah, well, it's the same content that would come out of the colon or the urine. We've just created a different door of exit. So what we've done is we've gone directly to accessing it straight out of the lymph system. But it's the body's intelligence. That's what, the whole discovery process, and it was just such an interesting journey of trying to determine and to answer, be able to answer your question, was what was occurring here. Why were some people experiencing complete relief on a sinus issue or a joint issue or a digestive issue or a bone issue or whatever? So it's like, how can this technology be, knowing exactly what it is that the body needs? Well, it's the body knowing. So the technology joins with the body wisdom, and your body has thousands of years of wisdom on how to survive. It is absolutely, completely programmed for survival. And if there's anything that I could get also across today is to trust, and also test, you might as well test it too, the intelligence of your body to give you the signals that it needs to tell you whether something is good or bad for you. Well, that's exactly what's happening in the process of release, is the body knows what is most toxic at this time, which is most running interference with its metabolism, its ability to function. So it will release that per session. The body's wisdom is understanding we are just creating a new outlet for which the content can be released.
So after the first, it depends on the person, I've noticed, but after the first 1 to 3 sessions, the water changes. And I've done it with it's not the machine. It's like with each array. I know it's not, because if I run the array in just plain water, or with a little bit of salt, like you're supposed to, without feet in it, it's different. And so it's always, I noticed that for the first 3 sessions that someone does, it's like this weird, frothy water. And then after a while, it becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. And you said that even when the water is clear and doesn't have the oily, frothy film that's coming out of us, that when you have the water tested, that they see that there's still high levels of lead, mercury, or aluminum coming out of the people, because we don't necessarily can see those particles in the water.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing is, people try to, especially the imitation models are all into the look of the water. And so like we completely like try to diminish that whole fascination. It's like, no, how does your body feel as a result of that session? But you're right. The content will change over time. Now, when you have the lighter purges, that is usually current levels of toxicity, especially hyperacidity. So what we notice with people who are really releasing a lot of acid in the session, and usually heavy metals with that, is that, I don't know if you ever noticed the feet exfoliating, the dead skin coming off of the feet. Yeah, that's when you know you've had a really big acid download into the water. But that's why we test with the pH to see then how the pH is rebounded, and usually in those cases you can see it. But I had a dentist phone me up the other day. I always get the greatest questions coming at me. And she goes, why was it that at the beginning of the session, the patient's pH was 7, but at the end of the session it was 5? And because people are expecting it to start at 5 and end at 7 at the end of the session. And I said, well, that's because whatever they ate or drank before, because she's a holistic dentist and she's dealing with lots of supplements and nutrients and, alkalizers. I said, whatever they ate or drank before they came in for a session, hyperalkalized them. So it reboined their alkalinity. But I said, that's not their native score. Their native score, their real score was the after score.
Yes.
So five was what they had, and that's what we're classically seeing with all of these sick people, is they're down in the 5 and 6 range on pH when they first come to us, and they're just like on their knees with some kind of issue in the body.
Right, and in our past interviews, you've talked about these test strips, which are so affordable, that you can use to test your saliva and your urine pH, and you explain in a previous interview exactly how to test your pH in the morning, and it gives, and then throughout the day, and to understand what it means. And it's a good indicator of where your body is right now. It's funny. The first time we used the test strips, my husband had just eaten a big glass of blueberries, and so of course his pH was like 8. It was perfect. It was like the best pH ever, and he had a big smile on his face. But you're right. When whatever we eat or drink can affect the pH, whether we took our supplements or ate some food that was alkalizing. So it's best to do it several hours away from food or first thing in the morning to get um, a baseline of where we are. Um, and that it's interesting though that it changes. I've seen pH change for the positive after people have done a session. But let's get into the this idea of how EMF is affecting us, because I know you're painting a picture.
Yeah.
I know you've been
Yes.
preparing us mentally for understanding what you're here to teach us today.
Exactly. Well, so that's why if we just keep in that idea of the stagnation and the cells being all stuck together because they didn't have any electricity. So that correlates with hyperacidity. So that's where the tie-in to that is, but it also ties into heavy metals, but then will lead into how the energy in the body is affected externally as, by external sources as well. So, of course, we know the body's made out of atoms. Now, these atoms produce, emit, and receive electricity. And there's a very specific frequency for health. All of our cells, organs, and tissues, and even your thoughts and emotions have a specific frequency. So they create, as a result of that frequency, an electromagnetic field. So we've all seen pictures of, that energy field that is emitted from beyond the physical skin. So there's an energy field that's emitted. And actually, I saw just this morning on something where when the astronauts got out of the shuttle onto the moon, that there was this glow of light around the astronaut. And so it was actually portraying that electromagnetic field. But even things like chanting, which is really interesting, and of course that's taking energy into the body through the oxygen. But even chanting something like Om, O-M, will actually create a mandala pattern around the body, and they've been able to see that. So what happens is the body requires certain things. It requires water, minerals, a flow as opposed to stagnation, and a pH of 7.3 to 7.5. 7.45. So now if you start to think of the body as an energy field, and just for an example, think about a tuning fork. When you ding at the first tuning fork, say you got 2 tuning forks, ding the first one and it vibrates at, whatever that frequency is. Then you bring it up against the second tuning fork, and you're not dinging the second tuning fork. You're just holding the vibrating first fork again near the second one. The second one will start vibrating at the same frequency. So it synchronizes to the first tuning fork. Now we just begin to realize that the human body is the same as the tuning fork, that our internals, this is an expression I coined, how our internals are affected by our externals. So now we look at things like solar flares and geomagnetic activity on the Earth. So solar flares cause an imbalance in the brain and heart synchronicity. So I don't know. Did you know this, Ashley? I found this out just recently, and I was quite astounded that, we all think of the brain as sort of the control tower at the airport, and it's giving off all of the signals to the airplanes kind of thing, the messages in the body. So we think of the brain as the major communicator in the body, but they found that in actual fact, the heart is communicating more to the brain than the brain is to the heart.
Yes. Yeah, it's something like I heard that recently, that the brain receives between 6 and 10 more signals in that it puts out.
I just thought that was so fascinating. And
Yeah.
so to me, that is so classic, because I mean, you and I operate at the physical level like we all do, but my fascination is to go up a few levels to the spiritual and to see how that correlates. So, the heart, of course, in Western medicine is the center of, you know, everything happening. Granted, if your heart's not pumping, then nothing's happening. So the heart is the center of the energetic aspect of the body. And so to find that the heart is the one who's the master communicator, I just thought was so brilliant. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, what happens though is that solar flares, to bring it back to the energy level, solar flares will affect things like our blood pressure. It will actually even affect reproduction and our immune systems. It affects the heart. It affects all neurological and causes neurological problems. Can even cause mental and emotional disorders, such as even as much as depression and suicide. So
Mm-hmm.
solar flares are doing that. Now, on the Earth itself, there is a natural frequency on the Earth, as you know, the Schumann's frequency, and it is 7.8 hertz. So, what's really interesting is I'm going to tie that back in with the brain frequencies in a minute. But basically, what happens with magnetic storms and solar flares is that it has an effect on the body, on the frequencies to our internal parts and functions. So it will alter the actual heart brain synchronicity, and it will change even the brain's level of melatonin.
I just had a complete aha moment. You mentioned that so I mean, hold that thought about melatonin because that's also interesting. But what you said just made me go, oh my gosh, what if? Okay, so you talked about solar flares increase suicide rates. I mean, that
Yeah.
it affects us on that level. You reminded me of back in the fourth grade, I read a paper on, and it always stuck with me, that during the times of the Santa Ana winds, the Santa Ana Hills in near LA,
Yes.
the wind would blow and it would create, because it was so dry, it would create positive ions, which are not positive. They're very bad for us. And they would increase the positive ions, the positive ionic charge of the air, and it would increase the suicide rates in the area. That they could
Yes.
see the suicides would go up when the Santa Ana winds blew because it would increase the ionic charge in the air. Again, creating, affecting us on an energetic level. We are electromagnetic, right?
Really.
That's how we work, and you go to a hospital, you get hooked up to machines to read your energy, right? That's how they read your heartbeat and read. They put all these, the EKG and then the EEG and all these machines on your head and your heart. They're reading the energy of your impulses, of your brain and of your heart. So, of course that makes sense. And it just hit me because lately I've been seeing how much all this information about the children ages from 10 to 24. I know 24-year-olds aren't children, but this generation,
Yes.
this particular generation, in the last 10 years, the suicide rates went up 52%. It is the second leading cause of death among those ages 10 to 24 right now.
Yeah.
And thinking about how much exposure they have to EMF, wondering if, and of course, the bullying on social media, and, that obviously plays a role, and the fact that they're given, this an overly toxic world with 80,000 more chemicals in their food than we had when we were 10. far more medications. They're even putting infants now on antipsychotic medication. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's
Ridiculous.
a toxic world. It's way more toxic than it was when we were kids. I agree that it's not just one thing, but to then think, wait a second, if exposure to an electrical frequency that is disruptive for the body can increase suicide rates, is it possible that the EMF exposure that this generation has had since they were born, if that is also playing a role?
It is hugely playing a role. I mean, here's the subtlety. When we find that solar flares are affecting us, I mean, the Schumann frequency at 10 hertz will speed up body reactions. But at 3 hertz, it'll slow it down, megahertz. And so they actually have been able to witness this on EEG patterns, like brain patterns. And what it's doing is it's affecting the calcium iron uptake in the brain.
Interesting. And so when it speeds up the calcium and iron uptake in the brain, what does that do?
Well, it's just that was just the illustration of how low these frequencies are actually having an effect. But here we go on to realize that solar flares are so far away. Schumann frequency is so subtle, but what is occurring is we've got this electromagnetic frequency, man-made, that's right up close. And when they originally came out and they said how cell phones were okay and they didn't cause any damage and all that kind of stuff, it was an infrequent use of them. But that's
Right.
not what's happening now. What's happening now is you can't go anywhere and not be exposed to it. Like, I mean, I went into, the grocery store and everybody's on their iPhone, either sending a picture back of some product to say, is this the one you want, or talking to somebody on it. I mean, it's like, or you're in a lineup, or you go to the doctor's office and everybody in the waiting room's on a cell phone. Like, I mean, you just can't get away from it. So what is occurring is that these frequencies, when it's a natural frequency like Schuler's, it's a resonance, and that frequency is a natural vibration. So the body has its own natural vibration. And then, so the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system of the human body vibrates at a certain level. And so you have your parasympathetic, and then you have your sympathetic. And what is occurring when they get around man-made frequencies is that is altering, the pattern is being altered. So, for example, we got the brain waves. So you have delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. So delta is like 0.5 to 4. And theta is 4 to 7. Alpha is 8 to 12. Now, remember when I talked about Schuler's frequency, that's why people feel so mellow when they're in an alpha frequency, because it's Schuler's frequency. But what is happening, which is what you brought in, and especially, going up into the suicide level, even on the extreme level, is that these kids are resonating like the tuning fork at beta and gamma, and that is 12 to 30 and 30 to 100. Well, what they found with autism is that children cannot settle into an alpha pattern. And so they're remaining in a ADHD or hyperactivity level because they can't settle the brain. Because I use the analogy of the, gerbil or the mouse on the wheel. And that's what happens with the brain when it gets hyperacidic. So when you got too much heavy metals in the brain, and of course the amalgam fillings are right next to the brain, and other things are getting there as well through other sources. Now you got hyperacidity, you've got heavy metals which put off chaos frequency right next to the brain and a higher frequency. is there any wonder why people can't settle? And we saw from what I talked about earlier with the melatonin that, if solar flares are affecting our melatonin level, I mean, my God, it's not surprising to see that, this electromagnetic man-made frequency is causing people to be completely insomniacs.
And remembering that when they approved cell phones for safety back in, gosh, was it the 80s? I don't
Yeah, it
know.
was the 80s.
It must have been the
Yeah,
80s. Yeah, when they did their tests, they tested it for like a 2-minute phone call or something, because back then you paid like $12 a minute
that's
for
right.
cell phone use. And so why would anyone have more than a 2-minute phone call? Back then it was like you called because you needed to ask if your wife needed to bring eggs home, and that would be like $12. So $12 to make that phone call to ask. So it was like we really did not use
Do
them
it.
very frequently. And they did a test, and they held a cell phone up to a man's head or whatever, and they figured that it heated up the brain a little bit, but not enough to cause damage for the 2 minutes. And then they approved it, and they haven't done, it's not required for them to do any safety tests now for someone to have a cell phone on their body or using a cell phone 24 hours a day. But
Now,
I,
let me add something to what
mhm.
you just said, because it's so important. Is that the man they tested was 210-pound male, 6 feet tall, and it went. As he said, it was a 2-minute phone call, and it heated up his brain, I think, 2 degrees, and went in 3 centimeters or whatever. But anyway, so now they've retested it using, thermography, heat sensory to see what it's actually doing to the brain, or like an MRI or, CAT scan kind of situation. And so they're able to see. So what, these people did was, God, I can't imagine being the subject of this person doing this. But anyways, they put him in, with a cell phone to see what was happening. So with someone like that guy who's got probably, a lion-sized head, it was going like, say, a third into his head. But then as the heads got smaller in terms of your children there, the was going further across the head, so that when you got a little kid who was like 8 years old, it went from one ear to the other all the way across his head.
And heating up the whole brain. I had a guest on the show. I can't remember his name right now. But an expert in this field said that they found that having a cell phone, holding it in your hand, or whatever the cell phone was basically close to, within a 2-inch range, the mitochondria in those cells would go dormant for hours afterwards. And when you have a cell phone up to your brain, the mitochondria in your brain are going dormant. And those are the powerhouses of the brain. No wonder we're feeling fatigued and not ourselves. So, but we're surrounded by this. We're surrounded by Wi-Fi. We're surrounded by cell phone towers. We're surrounded by computers. I'm in front of a computer right now to be able to talk to you. So we are surrounded by, and we have to be
Yeah,
in
it's
this
the
modern,
reality.
that's the reality. I mean, there's measures we can take. I know, like, we had Robin Openshaw on the show in the past talking about the kind of measures that we can take to reduce our EMF exposure. And there's smart things we can do. My husband and I never have the Wi-Fi on. We have a little switch on the back, and we just turn it on only when we need it, like when I use the sauna, because it's Wi-Fi, and then we turn it off.
And the routers, what you can do with the routers, which is what my husband has done, you put a timer on it. You can actually have it turned off and turned on by a timer. And so that just is wonderful, because it will make the difference. But along this level, you said something that I just really need to have the women understand is, for God's sake, do not put the cell phone in your bra. They actually showed on something I was looking at, where the cell phone, she had a tumor in her breast, and it was the exact shape of her cell phone.
Oh my gosh.
But the other thing women really need to understand is nobody should be wearing wired bras. That completely changes the whole electrical around your mammary gland, your breast glands, and also the heart. The heart is so close to that whole area, and sending into different frequency. Now, Rife back in 1920s said that every disease has a frequency. So here's the facts on the frequency. Diseased bodies start at 58. So cold and the flu. Now those pictures that I was telling you about before, the person had the flu, the blood pictures. So the person had the flu and the pH was 6 at the beginning. Now colds and flus frequencies start at 78 to 60. Candida overgrowth is 55. Receptivity to Epstein-Barr is 52. Receptivity to cancer is 42. Notice how the numbers are going down. And death begins at 25. So as the frequency of the body is being brought down, that's where the life of the cell, and that's what you talked about, the mitochondria, more and more the body is going into a lower state of frequency. The
sicker we become.
More unhealthy we are.
Yeah, that's something that Robin Overshaw brought up almost 2 years ago. I believe I had her on the show about 2 years ago. I know this because right after the episode, my husband went vegan. He went basically from eating Atkins, like he only ate meat. And then after hearing, I mean, this was kind of a compilation of many things he was hearing, but this was the straw for him, the final straw to break for him to decide to go whole food plant-based, that he heard that the healthier you are, the higher your body frequency, your body's vibrates. Our bodies vibrate at a certain level, and that they can hook you up to a machine and say, "Oh, you're vibrating at 80 hertz, right? Oh, you're vibrating at 100 hertz." But that when we are sick, that we go lower and lower, and at 60 and lower than 60 is disease. And then death is around, like on a deathbed is like 40. And she said, she started listing off the hertz of different, or the frequency of different foods, like broccoli and, these healthy foods, very, very high frequency, like 200, the frequency like of certain vegetables is 200. And she said, how much do you think pork is? And I think we had just eaten pork sausages for breakfast that morning.
Oh, no.
And she says it's 6. And I nearly fell off my chair. And she said, yeah, there's this, that's her whole book was called Vibe. And it was about this concept of we're either putting foods that lower our frequency into our body, or we're putting foods that raise our frequency into our body. And she's not trying to like make people go vegan. She's just showing you, like, when we eat dead animal flesh, we're eating a very, very low frequency food. And when we eat vegetables and fruit and raw foods, we're eating incredibly high frequency food. And they're seeing that the people who eat more low frequency foods, that just lowers their body's frequency into the frequencies that create disease. So if we're looking, if disease starts on an energetic level, then this is it. What can we do to raise the frequency? And raising the frequency of the body can also be exercise, breathing, praying, meditating, the things that bring us into that alpha state, right? The things that calm us down, unplugging from the Wi-Fi, unplugging from the EMFs, eating foods that are vibrating really high, juicing, smoothies, getting tons of vegetables into us. And that brings the whole body up. And because you can't be sick and be vibrating at 100, 100 on this frequency scale. You can't. The sick people always are vibrating at that lower level. So it just made so much sense if we're looking at disease from that energetic standpoint, like Rife was able to discover in the 1920s. And that book about him, which is you pick up that book, you'll finish the entire thing. It's a very short book, but you can't put it down. I got it on eBay. You have to get it used. I don't even think it's in print anymore. It's called The Cancer Cure That Worked. And it's about Rife's research and his discoveries in the 1920s and how he discovered that he could turn off disease in the body, basically explode viruses by using frequencies.
He would send back their own frequency to them, and that's what exploded them.
Yeah. He figured out what the frequency of cancer was, for example, and he was able to just explode it. It was like a sine wave that neutralized it. And then the government came in and destroyed everything and stole it all, because that is bad for business to be able to
Well,
end disease.
They tried to buy it first, and he wouldn't sell it. And so when he wouldn't sell it, but to go back to your food thing, just it's a really important point. Processed food and canned food, guess what vibration it is? Zero.
Oh my gosh.
Zero. No vibration. And then you think of all those people that are eating that kind of, yeah, it just makes sense, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It totally makes sense. So, yeah, it's such an interesting world. But when, you realize that, like for example, in Europe, when we go back to the EMF focus, in Europe, they call it electric smog. And when you think of that, it's just, it's so true. Like microwave and radio wave sickness is recognized as an occupational disease in Soviet Union. And then one out of a group of 17 men who worked on an experimental electromagnetic pulse experiment generating system in 1967, 5 of them died of cancer in the following 7 years. But the University of Colorado, the medical research found that death rate in certain cancers, such as leukemia, was higher than average in homes that were 130 feet or 40 meters from a high currency power line.
Can you say that again? 130 feet?
30 feet from a high current power line.
So that's not the regular ones, like the regular lines on the street, but like the really big ones that buzz?
Yeah, the buzz. Yeah, if it's a buzz, it's not a good thing. I was thinking this morning, because I loved your analogy in the other talk that you did with Robin, when you said it's too bad it doesn't create a burn, like a sunburn. Like sun is lovely. It will do things for you, but too much exposure isn't great. And so, so I was thinking about, if you just think of anything electric, like a beehive, but think of it, especially like a cell phone, as like a swarming beehive. Like in all of your sensory perception that's built into that beautiful intelligence in your body, you would never go stand by a swarming beehive. And so like just think of everything electric on that kind of level. And so what's the answer? The answer is distance. How far away you are to it. So like, yeah, holding a cell phone up to your head. But the other thing is that you also got to watch out that, all the iPhones, they not only are doing an antenna, the actual electric aspect is coming from the whole body of the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's making it different. But anybody who's using, YouTube, what's it called? Bluetooth. Bluetooth is putting an antenna right beside in your head. It's putting an antenna right in your head. So it's like what they found at University of California. This was a real shocker. They had this monster, well, not so monster, but it was, a cell tower. And so the cell tower was on the campus right beside this building. And what they found over a period of time was every single professor in every one of those classrooms ended up with brain tumor.
No.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And so, why are we not hearing about this, the adverse effects? I mean, you and I are, because we investigate it, and then we also do deep research to find it. But what's happened recently, and I'm sure that you've been telling people, but Google has been completely muffled.
Yeah.
And so people like Macola, The Truth About Cancer, even Green PubMed, I mean, all of these people have been knocked out by Google, and even, you know, on Amazon. Amazon is restricting what can be sold through Amazon because they're all been bought out by pharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm.
And so people need to realize, why are they not hearing about it? Because the media is being muffled.
You know, iTunes, which most of the listeners, like 95% of listeners, listen through iTunes. iTunes has not suppressed the information yet. Knock on wood. Good for
Yay.
iTunes. Yeah, I
Yay,
know.
iTunes.
I'm
We need to
I'm
all.
really happy that, because they've spent the last year optimizing their search engine. iTunes now basically transcribes all the audio for all the podcasts, so that when you search for things, like if you type in something very specific, it's going to bring up a better representation for you, because it scans through the content of what's said in the podcast and then brings up, you know, what you really want to find. So they're not, as of yet, they have not suppressed any holistic information, whereas Google, about 6 months ago, you know, a year ago, you could type in natural cure for, I don't know, for yeast infection, right? And you would
Yeah.
get all kinds of wonderful blogs by naturopaths and great, great, great information. Now, the first 5 are going to be medical, pharmaceutical-based medical things, and you have to go several pages, which no one ever clicks on page 2. It's like something like 1% of people click on page 2.
I go to 5.
Well, you're in the top, you know, 0.01% of people. Most people go to the first few in the search. But Google's also made it so that some websites are completely unlisted now, won't even show up in a Google search. And these are good, holistic websites. So yeah, there's a war.
Have you told people about DuckDuckGo?
I have not, but that's something that you could definitely let them know about.
Well, it's another search engine, and apparently they're shall we say, more open-minded. That you can find things through that one. So DuckDuckGo is another option for people to access through. But it's just, you just need to keep digging deeper to find the answers nowadays. Yeah, and it's really interesting, you know, because I have medical background. I was trained as a nurse, and so, you know, I can see a lot of what is occurring and what's being presented, and have that understanding of the filter that is going on presently. And you know, but the awesome thing, and that's why I really want to acknowledge you, Ashley, is, you know, you've gone out on a limb to create this, you know, entire environment in which people can find the truth. And the truth, you know, is, as my husband says, you know, EMF is what he calls inconvenient truth. People don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
They don't want to know that their cell phone isn't great, but you know, and like having your cell phone on in your car is like being inside a microwave. So oven. So, you know, people don't want to hear that part. But the thing is that your audience is so awesome because they are open-minded. They are seekers. They're truth finders. They're walking the talk. They're doing what it takes to change it around. And that's, you know, such a big thing, because, you know, the way things are on the planet, especially at this moment, you know, is quite chaotic. And it's so easy to get disillusioned. And when your energy goes down, your emotions go down, your mind, you know, starts to think all the bad things, and you just go into a negative spin. But like Ashley said at the beginning of the call, you know, you just do the domino effect in the right direction. So you take your nutrients, you drink your water, you do all the things that bring your electrical up. You dance, you sing, you do exercise, you move your body, you listen to positive influences, and you allow positive influences into your body, your being, and your world. And it becomes a whole different orientation. You don't have to resonate at that low frequency that the world is vibrating at right now. A bunch of us can just have a party and resonate at a whole different frequency. So let us all be high frequency tuning forks, and we'll all resonate together,
I love that. Teach us how. How can we resonate on a higher level?
First of all, it's mindset. Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a mindset. You need to just absolutely want to live that other life so that you're willing to move into action steps on what you can do. So you need to have a mastery mindset. You need to do what it takes. And number one is to create a healing environment inside and outside your body. So identify what you want. That's the first step. If there's anything, that's really important, is you got to know what you want. If you're going on a trip, where are you going? People spend more time and attention on their vacations than they do their lives. So what is it that you want? And then you create the actions to achieve it. So number one is to protect yourself. And number two is to nourish yourself. And these are not just physical, these are emotional, mental, and spiritual. And on the physical level, but also on all of those levels, is to purify yourself. So if you have someone, that's in your world, if they're your family, it can be kind of interesting. But, if there's negative influences in your world, you got to be, this is the one example that we'll use that's an office, an asset on a computer, is you can hit the minus screen. Minimize that influence in your world. So, the number one thing we need to do on a physical level is be smart. We have such incredible brilliance designed into us biologically, intelligently, and universally. We just connect with that wisdom that is so part of our nature. So, on an electrical level, obviously, you distance yourself from the electronics. You time, or dosage, you turn down the dosage level and how much you go on it. And obviously there's a, aspect to the intensity of it too. But here's the key of life is the contrast between expansion and contraction. Is your life expanding or contracting? And you just think about your muscles, expanding and contracting. So well-being, so expansion is relaxed. It's having an attitude and latitude of gratitude. And then there's a sense of ease that comes with that, and allowing. You are allowing your world to expand. You are allowing your health to expand. You are allowing yourself to feel good. So many of us, especially us women, I think, are programmed to not feel good, that we're supposed to be in service to everybody else. So I deal with all these women that are completely exhausted because they're the caretakers of their, they're the hubcap of their entire family. And nobody's taking care of them, but more importantly, they're not taking care of themselves. So there's an allowingness that self-care is a priority in your life. So the opposite is contraction, where there's a whole sense of resistance. There's resentment, there's anger, there's struggle, and there's blocking energy. And that's low frequency way to go through life. For sure. But the attitude of gratitude is so important. Like, one of the things that I do every day is I spend the day, literally all day, saying thank you. Like, I get the parking place, or, someone I connect with in the lineup at the grocery store, or wherever I'm doing my errands. We just have a wonderful interaction. And you may never ever see that person, but you just have the soul-to-soul connection in, 3-minute space of time, and it can change your frequency. And then, focusing on ideas and inspirations. Like, I spend all of my meal preparation time listening to inspirational kind of things. Like there's one that I'm listening to right now, and it's about breathing. And it's like, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. And so there's all these positive affirmations that have been given. And so you literally like breathe them in and then you send them out. And so that's why I always sort of see myself as the sunshine presence of, taking the light in and then sending it out. And having an attitude, this is a beautiful mindset to have, that everything today is falling into place. Like my day is harmonic. Everything around me is harmony. And so it's so important, because I am one of those who truly believes in God, the angels, and miracles. And so, all day long I will thank all those sources for setting everything up in my world to work. So I surrender to all that works is the most beautiful mindset and affirmation. And so if something derails in your world, you just say, okay, that's just a momentary time, but I am reattuning to all that works. And because I am Irish, I have a strong thing about signs. So I always ask for signs to be given to me. And it's amazing how many I get in a day. So it's so, so important to ask for help. And I mean, not only from humans, but from all sources, spiritual and above, to just come along. Because, the thing is, you got to set the tone within your being to vibrate at this higher frequency. So let me give you an example of fear. So I was going from Victoria to Vancouver, and on the way, because I was focusing on putting this together, what came into my awareness 100% was all the cell towers. So on the first trip to Vancouver, I saw all these cell towers, and I was just like a rabbit. I was like cringing every time I saw a cell tower, and it just set off all of this absolute sympathetic nervous system fight and flight response in my body. So my heartbeat got faster, my adrenaline was racing through my body, my respiratory level was higher, everything was sped up inside of me. And so I had all of this fear every time I saw a cell tower. And so what I realized on the second trip to Vancouver was that wasn't doing my body any good. So in the second trip to Vancouver, I decided to ask the 4 archangels to go surround each cell tower I saw. So I put all this light around the cell towers, and then violet flamed them, and I did all this spiritual stuff. And what was the most amazing thing, Ashley, was that I ended up feeling awesome. I felt so great. So when I said, oh, there's another cell tower we need to heal. So I send like all this healing energy to the cell tower so it couldn't radiate all this negativity. But what happened to me in the process of doing that was that I started feeling phenomenally calm, more centered. My breathing went deeper. I felt more relaxed.
Sure, because you weren't perceiving it as a threat.
Exactly. So that whole cell danger response, people need to watch out for that, because what happens biologically in the moment is when the body feels danger. Now that can be on a physical level, mental level, emotional level. When it feels danger, it goes into that fight or flight cell danger response, and it will physiologically change all of your body to gear up as if it was on espresso coffee.
Mm-hmm. Right. Any perception of a threat or a potential threat causes the body to go into that fight or flight response.
Exactly. So some of the things that you can do to, help the body in its frequency, of course, is to be conscious to, reduce your exposure to toxins, EMFs, and all the above that cause the danger response, and to decrease the heavy metals. Now, that is, number one, you see, we can do all these things in life. Like if you have a thorn in your finger and you can put a Band-Aid over it, you can put iodine on it, you can put rescue remedy on it, you can do all these things. But if you don't take the thorn out and address the core issue, then you're still going to have the problem. And that's why, it's so important, if people don't want to be a walking antenna, that they need to get the heavy metals out of their body. So for those that are really interested, and want to test their levels, a client of mine actually has a lab, and she is brilliant at labs and understanding the physiology of lab work and what is actually portraying it. She goes into a very deep level with it. So her organization and company is called My Labs for Life. So for those that are interested in knowing what their levels actually are, I would highly recommend that. And then, to do what it takes to decrease your body burden. Because, through input of diet and output of, releasing through either the urine, the colon, the detox organs, or, using the PES system, you've got to get that content out of the body, like the thorn in the finger. Until you release it, you're not going to feel excellent. So another thing people can do, and I talked about this in the last podcast, was slippery elm. Slippery elm is really great because, along with increasing fiber, which tends to absorb, toxicity in the body, and seaweed, which also helps to create a slippery mucosal level like slippery elm does. All of these will help so that you decrease leaky gut, because leaky gut is a huge problem, because when the protein molecules get across the body in too large of form, the body will go into that danger alert thing, and it will start to attack those. But what happens is heavy metals will start to be attached to those molecules as well, and the body will go into immune responses, and because it knows the body, the people have, the immune issues and diseases. Those are because the body's intelligence is at work trying to attack the foreign content that is on the tissue or the organ or the cell or whatever. And so we need to get that content out of the body to calm the body down. And that's what we see with these autistic children when they have a session. I mean, it's just so amazing to watch, what happens with these kids that, are so hyperactive. The moms say to me, how am I going to get him to sit for 30 minutes in a foot spa when he can't sit for 3 seconds? Mm-hmm. And I said, put him in and see what happens. And they completely chill out. Like this one child was only 4 years old and very, very hyperactive. I mean, the mother called him a Tasmanian devil because he was such a whirlwind. Anyways, but when he had a session, he would sit through the whole session very calmly. So there we're seeing the body is shifting from that danger response. It's mm-hmm. making them very hyperactive. The heavy metals and the acidity in the body is causing the pH to be at a very acidic level. And then the EMFs are amplifying to make the poor body an absolute antenna. And so that's why, the kids are, in this, beyond hyper state. And so, and with the little autistic kids, apparently, when they knock their heads on the floor, the reason they're doing that is they're trying to numb their brains. And that's why they're doing it. But, when we've had, whether it's little ones or very elderly, like one of the examples, is kidneys. Now, I don't know if you realize, but glyphosate, which everybody, is well talking about these days, Roundup, did you realize that Roundup has 11 metals in it?
Oh, interesting.
And pesticides, every pesticide they tested had like 22 metals in them. So now, you have people who are walking around, you know, in bare feet and exposed to all of this on grass. Like the other day, somebody phoned me up because their client phoned them up because he had just gone outside in Florida and walked on grass, and he absorbed all this glyphosate through his feet. So what they found in Sri Lanka was that there was a huge correlation. They actually banned glyphosate because
Yep.
they found there's a huge correlation to kidney disease. So
Yeah,
what?
I had Dr. Stephanie Seneff on the show. That is definitely an episode worth listening to. Had her on twice. And listeners can go to learntrail.com and search in the search box for any past episodes when you want to listen to them. But Dr. Stephanie Seneff is a PhD MIT top research scientist with a team of researchers, has been trying to decipher what's going on with autism and the huge spike. When I was a kid, I'm 39, I'm going to be 40, so it's not, it's not that long ago. But when I was a kid, there was 1 in 10,000. I never knew an autistic child growing up because that's how rare it was. And granted, they've changed the they've changed how they diagnose autism. So there's more of a spectrum. And now maybe children they would have perceived as hyperactive back then might be put on the spectrum now. But however, that does not account for, and you talk to teachers who've been teachers for 40 years, they will tell you the children have changed. They are not the same. Now it is 1 in every 30 or 40 children are diagnosed on the spectrum. So literally every classroom has someone on the spectrum, or potentially, right, could have someone on the spectrum because that's how common it is. And that wasn't the case back then. So Dr. Stephanie Seneff with these amazing research scientists have put together this information because they're looking for what happened in the last 40 years to cause it to go from a rare event to a common event that our children have autism. And what she saw, what these scientists saw, was that glyphosate is present in the MMR vaccine because they use some kind of
Adjutant.
they use an extract from a bovine material. And she explains it. She explains it how does Roundup get in a vaccine, and she explains how.
Right.
But basically, what she describes is that glyphosate, and she didn't even talk about the fact that Roundup also has 11 metals in it. She said that glyphosate itself is a chelator, meaning it binds to heavy metals and washes them away. Well, this particular molecule and how it works. Glyphosate will bind to a heavy metal, so let's say aluminum, and then it will release, it lets go of, kind of like losing a static charge, losing a bond. It lets go of heavy metals when the pH changes. And she says, where in the body does pH change? When fluids cross over from one kind of fluid to another. So, for example, blood becomes urine, pH changes. Blood becomes cerebral spinal fluid, pH changes. And she said, what's happening with the glyphosate when we eat it, so let's say our children are eating it, it's in there. It's very high in cereal, non-organic cereal, and I'm not going to mention which brands, but they're circles, little holes in them, look like donuts. And all kinds of other cereals out there on the market are tested very high for glyphosate. So we eat glyphosate, it binds to heavy metals and releases them, deposits them in our kidneys and in our brain. And they're able to see this. And that's why that's what Dr. Klinghardt sees as well. And that's how he's able to reverse autism, because what we're seeing, the majority of people on the spectrum now are not actually autistic. They have all the same symptoms as autism.
Yes.
It's not actually the 1 in 40 that we're seeing now is not autism. A true autism is still like that 1 in 10,000. What we're seeing is toxicity in the brain, heavy metal toxicity in the brain, and overexposure to these frequencies like Wi-Fi, which are stimulating the metals in the brain. So this is what Dr. Klinghardt says. And then he backs it up by completely reversing autism. He gets children who are rocking, beating their heads, and nonverbal to be able to talk again, completely function in society, be happy, be healthy, and go to school and later go to college. He talks about in our interview that the children he's worked with for so many years, because he's been a doctor for over 40 years, he has children that are now professors and PhDs and composers and very intellectual and wonderful positions. And these kids were rocking and nonverbal when they came to him. And so he says it's not autism. And the thing is, we are allowing the first, we're allowing this blanket diagnosis to then prevent us from seeking the answers. Like, well, why? Right? Why is it? So it's sort of, it is and it isn't vaccines is what they're saying. Because you can't just say it's all vaccines, because it's actually, what they're saying is it's actually the glyphosate. And that although vaccines do have heavy metals in them, which is like you're directly depositing heavy metals in the body, the delivery system into the brain is the glyphosate. So that's what these scientists are proposing. And then, well, what do we do? That's the next question, because as individuals, we can't stop them from spraying glyphosate. We can choose not to buy it. We can choose not to buy those products. I even know listeners who have called up their organizations around them, like the schools and the golf courses and their neighborhoods, and convinced the communities to stop using glyphosate. So there are things that we can do on individual levels, but we can't, unfortunately we can't change everything. We can do what we can do, but what we do have control over is our day-to-day choices. And so there are things that we can do for ourselves and our children on a day-to-day level to ensure that we minimize our exposure to these chemicals that are rampant in our environment. I wish there was like some kind of like special goggles we could put on to see all the chemicals, because
Yeah.
you can't see glyphosate when it's in your food, right? But wouldn't it be wonderful if we put on remember that sci-fi movie? I love sci-fi movie. I love sci-fi anything. And there's that sci-fi movie, was it called They Live, where he puts on the glasses and he can see all the aliens that are living among us. Imagine if we could put on these glasses and see the damaging EMFs and see the damaging chemicals, and then look and see the healthy foods that aren't contaminated, that don't have radiation and pesticides, and they are healthy and vibrating and on a good frequency. Imagine if we had that ability to
Well, you do have the ability, because if you go into the grocery store and you see the produce that looks like they put it out 4 weeks ago, that will tell you, the unhealthy state of the lack of energy in that food. But if you, like in the markets, when you go in the summertime and you see the food that's just come out of the ground, I mean, its color, its vibrancy, that is one of the things where you can tell how high the level of minerals are. And minerals in the body create the electricity. So if the food is like this brilliant, like a carrot, just, imagine the most vivid color of orange that you can ever imagine, and then you look at a carrot that looks like it's been bleached, because it has, then you get which foods are the best ones for you. And then you start to look around, but your body will cue you to all of that if we just tune into that. And that's what's so brilliant. I want to give an example, because you brought up Dr. Klinghardt. Here's one of his clients. An 8-year-old boy who had a brain injury and was in total agitated behavior. when he first came to us, his pH was 6. And so again, that agitation was being antagonized by that pH. But he would, when he had a session, it would boing up to 7.5. But here's the way I want to share the story is that he became so calm and relaxed. And I was on the phone with his mom. And so I was asking for his feedback at the time. And he goes, I love my foot spa, he says. And then he says in the most beautiful voice, he goes, I feel so good. And you could just hear the joyous tone. And then we had another 5-year-old, because it's always so awesome when you can connect with the kids, because as you said, they're the ones who've been most exposed in their lifetime. So there was a 5-year-old, and she was very, very hyperactive and, if not on the spectrum, close. But anyways, she went to kindergarten, and the teacher asked her, and the whole class, to draw their favorite family activity. And she drew herself having a foot spa and mom putting the water into it.
Oh.
Isn't that awesome? But what was so lovely was that the mom told me after her sessions, she noticed how her daughter became more affectionate and would hold eye contact now. And she would become more articulate, like your friend's son, But here's the interesting thing, which we didn't mention before to give insight. Heavy metals affect the humans in this way. They create headaches and migraines. And we talked about that in the podcast on copper, especially. Fatigue, stress symptoms and responses, dizziness. So how many people have you got, ringing in the ear and that kind of thing, and sleep disturbances? So skin issues, GI issues, muscle cramps and aches and joint pain and stiffness. A lot of people phone me up and say, how come I'm now experiencing this when I'm 40? And I've never experienced this before. And that the answer to that is the accumulation factor. And they're also experiencing things like numbness. But, to turn that around is just so awesome. Like, I've got to give you this example because we were talking about the glyphosate. So here's the example that I was bringing up because I want people to realize there is an answer. There is solutions. It's not, we're doomed. So here's the sunshine coming up in dawn. So we had a famous wildlife artist. He was a photographer, but he also did artwork. Originally did artwork, and now he does photography. He's in his 70s, and he was in complete renal failure. And the nephrologist was hounding him like crazy to go on dialysis. But he didn't want to for all the reasons that most people would understand, including having to sit, next to a machine that's, anyways, won't go into it. So anyways, he goes and has, because his doctor recommended it to him, has sessions in our system. And he has not had to go on dialysis. As a matter of fact, his nephrologist, the kidney doctor, and 4 other nephrologists have all told clients of ours that they have never, ever seen kidney function improve. And these are old-time docs, like they've been in business for decades. And so they said, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. But that's why, in this illustration, the whole thing is you've just got to get the toxicity out. So by doing the fiber and the water and the minerals, and also, of course, B vitamins, because the B vitamins create healthy nerve cell growth. And then iodine, people, we talked about mitochondria. By the way, I don't know if you know, mitochondria in the cell creates energy, but so it creates energy, and that's ATP. Now, ATP in the cell creates energy, but ATP outside the cell actually is part of the alert signal of the danger. So that's kind of interesting. But anyways, going back to solutions, iodine feeds the mitochondria. Now, when you were born, Ashley, everybody was using iodine. for any cuts or scrapes. They're using it for surgery preparations. You saw people being prepped, shaved, and then iodine put all over their belly when they were having whatever operation. And so iodine used to be part of our entire culture, but it has completely disappeared in our era. But it actually is a mineral. So we think of iodine in the holistic field as feeding the thyroid, but in actual fact, it feeds every cell in the body because it's a mineral and the mitochondria needs it to function. So you talked about before when the EMF puts the mitochondria in a state of shock and, goes offline for a while. Here's how to bring your mitochondria online. And then, as you mentioned earlier, too, I mean, breath work is so important. And when you breathe through the feet, because we're all spinning too fast, because we're multitasking, our days are requiring us to do more in it than there's time, and that creates pressure internally. So we need to ground ourselves. So just go through your day and breathe through your feet. So not only will that oxygenate your body and bring energy into your cells, but it will also ground you. Then the other thing that's really, really important nowadays is Bach flowers. So Bach, like the musician, B-A-C-H, Bach flowers help to balance out your emotional and mental realms. And there's 38 different remedies, and you can just get them at the health food store, look it up online, whatever.
It's like homeopathy for emotions.
And thoughts. Yeah. So it's like mindsets and so it takes, like, rescue remedy is the most famous one, and veterinarians, like animals, will use it, for the distress of the animal. And so, when it works on kids and animals, it's not just the placebo effect.
Yes.
And so that one's a really great solution. But the others is to smile. The big thing is you got to get oxygen up into the brain. By smiling, you're literally relaxing the muscles around your neck, and that opens up the arterial system to the brain. So we want to get that oxygen and nutrients up into the brain. And so by smiling, you open up the arterial system. By frowning, you close it down. So think, because we're at Christmas time, think of the difference in the face of Santa Claus and Scrooge. And that will show you what smiling and gratitude does, because Santa's so helpful. It's so grateful for all those little elves. So and Scrooge has got a totally different mindset. And so look in the mirror every day and look to see what your face is looking like. And you want to get your face to have that permanent smile and not the permanent frown. So one of the things that I really want to focus on, and it actually was a book that I have sitting in front of me every day, because what I do in the morning is I choose to get up and immediately go exercise, and I do Shiba Fa. So that is SHI space BAFA. And this was designed by the Chinese to keep the Chinese out of the hospital. So it's like stand-up yoga kind of posture. Some people think I'm, like, when I'm waiting for the ferry, I'll do it in the terminal, and they go, "Oh, are you doing Tai Chi?" I said, well, it's sort of similar, or Qigong, and it's sort of similar to that too. So it's movement with breath and intent, but it actually opens up the physiology of the body. And so while I'm doing that at home, I have a book that's in front of me, and it says, and this is your message for today: love only today. Breathe more, stress less, and choose love, because that will keep you in a parasympathetic mode.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing is, treat your body as your best friend, because it is.
No kidding. We need to step back and look at the thoughts we have about ourselves, and look at how we treat ourselves, and think about how we treat our best friend, or how we treat a loved one. And start treating ourselves like we're worth being put first, because if we put everyone else first, we won't be here to take care of them.
Oh, yes. You know what? I was going through my notes as you were saying that. One of the things that going back to the electromagnetic solutions, things to do is reduce the amount of sources of EMF in your life, reduce your time exposure, increase your distance from it, the beehive concept, use wired accessories. Now, there's a whole test that you can do with a cheap AM radio, because a lot of these, gadgets that will test the level of output from an electrical thing do sort of tend to be pricey. But here's something you can do on a easy level. Get hold of a really inexpensive AM radio. Now, not AM, FM, just AM. Turn it on, and you can either have it on a station or in between a station, and it will create that kind of noise. But take it up against an electronic thing, and it will amplify the closer you get to it. So you can go around. Now, my friend who has that My Labs for Life, she will do this when she goes into hotel rooms, and she will go up against the wall to see where the wiring is. She'll go up, close to the bed to see, anything that's, active there. She'll unplug the alarm clock, radio. And so you can actually go up to all the electronics in your house, and you can see what kind of intensity they're putting out. And I mean, one of the suggestions is just unplug obviously you can't unplug your fridge or your freezer, but the appliances that you're not using, so it's not putting things out. But here's another one that is so easy to not do, is when you go to the grocery store, or even, like London Drugs, or, Costco's, or whoever has them, do not use one of those scanners, self-checkout.
Oh, really?
Because, they're putting out major stuff. Yeah, I back away anytime I see that light. My body has that response. And even when you're fueling up your car, make sure you're breathing the opposite direction of the fumes.
Or just hold your breath.
Usually when you fill up your car, you can't hold it that long, but just try to catch the wind in the other direction. And then, just listen to your body's alert signals. Your body is awesome for understanding, what you need in the moment. And just tuning into its wisdom is so wonderful.
Absolutely. And I'd say that more specific advice on decreasing heavy metals in the body. Dr. Stephanie Seneff and Dr. Klinghart both go into this, but I've had firsthand experience with it, having spent the last 2 years working on, or more than 2 years actually, working on decreasing my heavy metals. And obviously I love the PES system. I'm having great experience with it. I sweat in my sunlight and sauna. I eat the chlorella from Energy Bits. And that is my favorite brand, because she has it tested twice. And it's all about purity. There's a lot of chlorella out there that has lead in it. And hers does not. I've had Catherine Arnston on the show several times sharing about the benefits of algae, but chlorella specifically is a chelator. And then taking herbs like parsley and cilantro and putting them in a blender, maybe like a Vitamix. You can throw in something like a handful of spinach or kale and blend it with some water and drink it. Doesn't need to taste good. I mean, if you want to make it taste good, throw in, an apple and some ginger to make it taste good. But it's really not about taste, because you just kind of chug it and get it into your body. But that the cilantro is very effective for gentle chelation as well. So those are those daily gentle things. Now there's also a whole form of homeopathy that are homeopathic chelators, and that would be worth going to, and I've used them in the past, that'd be worth going to a naturopathic physician or a homeopath to get access to those as well. But these are all the things that we can do gently that are very supportive of the body, that don't have side effects. Like if you were to go get actual chelation therapy, IV chelation, that unfortunately also strips all the really good minerals out of the body as well. It kind of washes. It's kind of like taking antibiotic. It takes the good with the bad,
And you
and
do need to watch out for that one, because
yeah,
especially calcium, if they don't get the calcium levels right, I mean, they've actually had people not be on the planet after that experience because their
right.
calcium levels were. So that's why a lot of naturopaths will not choose that methodology to do that. Now, what was really interesting was we have an acupuncturist and other therapists who use our system, and they said that what they're finding nowadays, Ashley, is that people are not able to naturally release their toxic burden loads because it's just coming in too quickly. And so she
Mm,
actually, this one acupuncturist had a patient who he worked in the industry of, he was actually an inventor. So he worked with a lot of metals and a lot of chemicals, but silly soul didn't put gloves on.
mm,
So he had for 20 years pain at 7 out of 10. And she was, doing a lot of the different methods you just mentioned, and she wasn't able to shift this guy at all. And so finally she, did a detox foot spa with him, and boom, the water just turned completely black. The guy was just so full of heavy metals. So, some people are getting good results through those methodologies, but if you're using those and finding that you're not getting it, is just because your load or burden level is too high, and so that you need to then do, a more efficient methodology. And that's what we found was just with the older someone is, the higher levels they have, and the higher levels they have, the more they're a walking antenna, and so they're more, feeling the effect. But with all of those methodologies that you mentioned, just to highlight it again, please make sure that you're drinking lots and lots of water to help the flushing process after doing any kind of therapy, because otherwise you're just going to get it reabsorbing in your body.
I love doing things to stimulate the lymph system. Not a lot of people understand what the lymph system is. So we have our circulatory system, which, that we understand that there are arteries and veins and that blood is circulating through them. Lymph is everything else. Lymph is the fluid in between every single cell, an interstitial fluid. This fluid is part of the immune system, and it also it delivers nutrients to the cells. It helps remove toxins away from the cells, and it's like our cells are coral reef. They're stationary animals in a sense. They're stationary creatures, in that the lymph system is like the ocean, bringing nutrients to it and removing toxins away from it. And so the lymph system doesn't have a heart to beat it. It does get it does kind of get sucked back up, brought up back into our circulatory system, so that the liver can flush, can clean it, and so that those toxins can be brought to the kidneys as well. But our lymph system doesn't move if we don't move, and the only way it actually pumps, because it doesn't have a heart to beat it, is by moving our joints. And because at each joint in our body there are lymph nodes, and the nodes kind of squeeze and pump this along. So with this day and age, we're not moving like we're designed to move. We're sitting all the time. And we're
Stagnation.
being
Yeah.
stagnant, right? So I love a rebounder, which is a
Yes.
small and you should get an adult one. I tried using my son's one, that does not work. Get the get a small rebounder. I have it actually linked on my website at the top of learntruehealth.com. There's like Ashley recommends, and it goes to Amazon, and my favorite health gadgets are there. But there's an adult rebounder, and you're not supposed to jump on it to the point where your feet leave the mat. It's actually just a very gentle. Your body's only moving 3 or 4 inches up and down. You're just bouncing
Yeah.
gently, as if
Rocking chair motion rather than roller coaster ride.
right, yeah, you're just bouncing gently up and down, kind of like if you imagine if you were holding a baby and you just want to bounce the baby, but you're bouncing your whole body on the rebounder. And do some deep breathing while you do it. Just do it for 5 minutes, put on a good song, 1 or 2 good songs, and you're done. And do that a few times a day. That's flushed your entire lymph system, flushed all the fluids. Now, of course, going for a brisk walk, doing weightlifting,
Yes.
doing cardio, all that would help as well. But if you're at an office or at home and you can't just leave and go for a brisk walk for 15 minutes a few times a day, then jump on a rebounder. And I noticed that when I do a rebounder, like before a PES session or before soaking in magnesium or before going in the sauna, that I get better results during my
Yes.
detox. Much better results. It's very interesting. Just a few minutes of stimulating the lymph system, how that kickstarts detoxification.
It is. It's amazing how that works. And here's a great visual for the lymph system: is just a volcano, and you got the molten lava at the core of the mountain, and you want to release it to the surface. So in the human body, you've got, the toxins stuck inside the cell, and it needs to release. So the lymph system is the portal to get it out of the body. And so just image the lymph system to being like lava tubes.
Oh yeah, lava tubes throughout the body. Right. Sure, sure. Yeah, so we've got this sludge, we've got this stagnation, we've this heavy metal buildup through many different sources, but that, it's no longer a problem that only welders have, or only people who've worked directly with heavy metals. And now we're seeing that, like you said, entire towns. If there's a company that's emitting heavy metals into the water and the air and the soil, that the entire town is sick from it. And the sickness is going to show up as different symptoms depending on someone's genetics.
Yeah, you know what I just found out, which is just horrible, is that in Canada, they started to test the water, and the water in many of the Canadian cities was worse than Flint, Michigan.
The water in the tap?
Yeah.
Sorry, you said water and I imagined lakes. I was like,
yeah, no, the water,
you're saying
tap water.
So I was just for Thanksgiving, several of my friends got together and we had like a Friendsgiving. American Thanksgiving just happened for listeners who are not in the United States. And it's different than Canada. But basically last week I was at a friend's house, and we're all very health conscious. It was a Whole Foods plant-based Thanksgiving. It was great. We did bowls, and there was like 40 different things that we could choose from. It was so delicious. It was amazing. So, so yummy. And we had all our kids there, and we had a really, really great time. The kids were on one side of the house, the adults were on the other. It was fantastic.
Lovely.
It was wonderful. Yes, it was great. We had little adult time. And I was helping to prepare some of the food, and I noticed that there was like these black flakes in the quinoa, like the water. And I'm like, the water that we used, we put the water in the quinoa. And at first I thought it was maybe some food particles of something else that got like washed into it. And then I realized it was these big black flakes. So I started picking it out. And then I go to use the sink, and black flakes were coming out of the water, the tap. Big black flakes were coming out of the tap. And it's an older house in Seattle.
Lead.
Is that what that is? I was like,
see, anything, that's what's so amazing. Anything prior to 1975, that's not that long ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
so that's the thing, is that we're, just to bring it back to solutions. So you get exposed, so you can't freak out about what you're exposed to every day. That will just acidify your body more, keep your body in, sympathetic overdrive, cell danger mode. That's why you got to take mastery over your emotions and your thoughts, because we are all exposed to all this content every day. But it doesn't mean that it has to cripple you. It doesn't mean that it has to cause illness in you. You do the dominoes in the right direction, and you move it out. But the most important thing is your mental attitude and your mindset. So be your body's own best friend. And so if you have something that derails your day, some event that causes you agitation, that puts you in a sympathetic focus, catch yourself in that moment and just absolutely breathe. Like, breathe in, breathe out. Just hear me saying this to you. Breathe in, breathe out. And reset. Hit your reset button by saying to yourself, now, if this was happening to my best friend, what would I tell him or her to do in this situation? Because you're brilliant at giving awesome, wise advice to others. So now you just need to give it to yourself. But the key here is you gotta do whatever you advise the other one to do. Amen.
Right? We're so good at giving advice. We need to start taking our own advice.
Because you're objective when it's someone else's story, but you lose that clarity when it's your own, because you go to hindbrain, fight or flight. So I'm bringing you to the front part of your brain, and you can even tap on the front part of your brain, like right up by your hairline, and that will bring you to your creative centers of your brain, and then you can go back into a thinking mode. But when you go into fight or flight, you go right into the back of the brain, and you shut down all your creativity in that moment.
Well, here's what happens. Someone goes, I should eat more vegetables, right? Or whatever it is that they decide they should do. Oh man, I should turn off my Wi-Fi, or I shouldn't have my cell phone on me, or I want to make these changes. And then there's this other voice in the head that goes, but, and excuse. Oh, but the kids won't like that, or my husband doesn't eat that way, or like
you rationalize
we rationalize ourselves back to status quo.
I know. And that's where you got to catch yourself. So that's where the word mastery, we're all on this planet to learn mastery. That is why you're here. And the first mastery you need to accomplish is over your thoughts and your feelings and your reactions. So I always find it very fun in a day to have my human experience and my spiritual experiences happening simultaneously. So I feel how my emotions are like riled like a dog with hackles over some, injustice or something that's happened, or, someone almost hits your car, whatever. And so I feel the reaction happen, and then I also watching the reaction happen. But in that moment, I can just choose to breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. That's sort of like the reset button and rethink button. And then you can choose how you respond instead of react.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today and bringing this awareness. I'm sure many of us have heard of these different things, but we go back to that status quo. We let the excuses come in, or sometimes we just like to go unconscious. And right now is the perfect time to become conscious again. We tend to do it right around the new year. The most amount of gym memberships happen right around the new year. And then by March, the attendance drops down by like over 70%. So it's how we are. But if we could this time around, especially since we're coming into a whole new decade, 2020, we can really kick into a different gear and never go back to the old complacency. Kick into a new gear by taking Kellyan's advice and start by, get out a journal, get out a blank piece of paper and ask yourself, what do I want? What do I want? What kind of health do I want in my body? And what do I want to do about it? And if you ever find excuses, if you ever hear the little voice go, but I'm too tired in the morning to go to gym, or I don't, juicing, I don't like cleaning up after juicing, or my kids don't like eating that way. I'm gonna have to cook for two different, whatever, all those little excuses, right? You can write them down on a separate piece of paper and just keep writing down the excuses, because get it out of your head. I find that when we get the mess out of our head, and that's why working with a health coach really helps, working with a counselor really helps, someone that is not judgmental, doesn't have an ulterior motive, like maybe if you talk to a friend or a family member, they would have an ulterior motive, but someone who's a sounding board. And then you get the chaos out of your head and you start to see it for what it is. And those excuses stop having power over you. Because, and I've heard this from so many people, like we'll say to the little excuse in the head, oh, vegetables don't taste good. I don't want to eat a stir fry, or I don't want to eat a salad. I don't want to have a green smoothie. That doesn't taste good. That little voice in the head is trying to convince us not to do it. But the second you put that first bite in your mouth of that salad, or drink that smoothie, it's like, this is good. My body's buzzing. Today for breakfast, I had a green juice. I made it, and my son drank it too. My husband drank it. And our bodies were buzzing until after the gym we came home and had lunch. And it was just like we were buzzing. We felt so good. But you bet that little voice in my head first thing in the morning when I woke up was saying, can we just sleep in longer? We don't have to go to the gym. I want waffles for breakfast. I don't want to have a juice. Like that's the thing we're fighting against, right? Is either the status quo in our own head, or we make up excuses for that other people wouldn't like it. Like, oh, my husband wouldn't like it, so therefore I'm not going to do it. Or, you know, we think about, oh, the children wouldn't like it, so therefore I can't do it, right? We don't even talk to them about it. We just decide that there's going to be too much turmoil, and therefore we're just going to stick with the status quo. But the status quo is going to continue to give us the ill health that we have right now.
Low frequency.
Right. So let's get ourselves to a new
Let's get
frequency.
to a high frequency. And so
Yes.
one of the things I do, like you just said, is all day long I look and I surround myself with high nutrient food. Whether it's chlorella or wheatgrass, or minerals, or my drink that I love to do, which is turmeric, goat's whey, mineral matrix, and what else do I put in there? The slippery elm, and sunflower lecithin, and then I've been adding collagen to that. So I just create a drink or something, some form of nutrients that are easy for you to literally absorb, and when you take that into the body, you just make your body sing, your cells sing. And that's what, is so lovely, is like when your bodies are singing like a chirping robin in springtime, you're at a higher frequency, your thoughts are clear, your emotions are balanced, you're feeling like singing, and you have a energetic sunshine presence. And so, one of the things that I wish for you in this next year of 2020 is that you completely open up to receiving all the blessings this wonderful world has to give you, and that you allow us to support you and to surrender to the highest blessings you could ever imagine. Just literally open up your hands right at this minute and just say, I surrender to God's, the angels, or whatever it is you honor, support, and I receive your blessings today, and I will then pass them forward. Beautiful.
I love it. Thank you so much, Kellyann, for coming on the show and getting us aware, because the first step's awareness. Just like in AA, right? The first step is being aware.
Awake.
Being awake and conscious. We are awake and aware and conscious. And then we need to know what we want and write it down. And then also
make a choice.
And make a choice.
A conscious choice, which is what you were talking about.
I have a whole interview. This was done a while ago, like maybe close to 3 years ago. So you can look it up on learntruehealth.com about how to install healthy new habits. There's a way to utilize how the brain works to create new habits.
Great.
And I mean, you could listen to that whole episode to get all the steps, but the takeaway is grab a habit you already do and piggyback a new habit onto
Yeah.
it.
I call it
So,
the domino effect in the right direction.
right, yeah. So if you always, I use the coffee as an example. If you always brew coffee in the morning, what can you do while you're brewing coffee? What new habit? And so my husband took like these exercise bands and would do exercise. This is back when we brewed coffee. He would do exercises. It's like, I don't know, 5 minutes. And he'd really feel it in his legs, burning, because he'd do these leg exercises until the coffee was done. If you brush your teeth every morning, what could you do right before or after brushing your teeth? So you grab a habit you already do that you never forget to do, and that even during vacations or weekends you still do.
The one with the brushing of the teeth, let me add that in, is you look in the mirror at yourself and you say, I love you. And you look into your eyes and keep doing it until you can totally open up to receive that love back.
Beautiful. So we think about the different habits and we install things like that. So it might be, how can we, get our 8 cups of vegetables in every day, right? How can we get our 80 ounces or more water in every day? Get our supplements and minerals in every day. Get some kind of exercise that stimulates the lymph system every day. Get some kind of green smoothie filled with those greens that I'd mentioned before that are amazing. Get them in first thing in the morning because they will replace the need for coffee. You get a good greens alive, get some alive food, juice it or make a smoothie. Feels amazing.
I suck on chlorella tablets all day long.
Yes.
I have them as a candy.
Well, my son loves them. He calls them green crackers. And some people complain that they're dry and they get stuck in your teeth. I chew them with water and it just dissolves. So I don't have a problem. But you can also take the chlorella tablets and put them in a smoothie if you want. So it's little habits. But if every day we switched a few negative things into positives, it will exponentially grow. And we want to look at decreasing our exposure to the heavy metals and to the EMFs. And we want to look at everything that we can do to support the body's ability to not have that stagnation. I know you told me about Shiba Fa, and I'm going to go look it up on YouTube. You mentioned that you listen to these motivational talks, like while you're doing
Yes.
your food prep. Where do you get them from?
I am. It's on YouTube. So if you look up I am affirmations, and the one that I love the best, he does a ton of them, and is just put in I am affirmations dash miracles and gratitude, and it just has the most soothing music and beautiful visuals and fabulous things. So I just listen to that when I'm doing the meal preparations, every day, and then just take that in, and then focus on your breathing, because that was the other one that I added on recently, doing the affirmations and just breathe it in and breathe it out. So like you're taking it in and you're giving it out. Breathe it in and breathe it out.
I love it. Awesome. Kellyann, is there anything left unsaid to wrap up today's show?
I think just, for people to be gentle on themselves, because, we're always got that parent voice in our head of all the things we didn't get done today or the derailments that happen. It's so easy to focus on them. And just at the end of the day and throughout the day, to take pauses of time where you just sit and do nothing but breathe. Just literally sit in a chair and just completely relax your body so that you go into that parasympathetic nervous system. And so, the summary of the whole entire topic today is Health is putting the right stuff in and getting the wrong stuff out. Illness is putting the wrong stuff in and not getting the wrong stuff out.
And not putting the right stuff in.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we want to definitely put the right stuff in.
Right. Higher
And
vibration.
exactly everything, whether that's on a physical level, mental level, or emotional level, or is especially spiritual, because the spiritual can transform all of the others so quickly. And it's so important to connect into that realm.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kellyann, for coming on the show. And listeners can check out your website.
PlatinumEnergySystems.ca.
I was going to say PS.
Right, that's
PS.
right. Platinum energy. You know, if people are so fun, they go platinum, and I said, yeah, it's like the ultimate, credit card. The platinum, the platinum energy. That's what you want, is the ultimate, the highest frequency, energy. And so, PlatinumEnergySystems.ca.
Great. Excellent. Thank you so much, Kellyann. And listeners, definitely check out the past episodes as well. Episode 292, 293, 329, and 330. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, and can't wait to have you back again. Thanks so much.
Well, and so awesome that to connect with you always, Ashley. And thank you so much for being such an amazing person yourself, and willingness to be who you are, and to be, a beautiful circle of influence on this planet this time, because your message is exactly what we all need to hear, that there is a way forward, and then we just need to all pass that forward.
Yes. Let's turn this ripple into a tidal wave and help as many people as possible to learn what it is like to have true health.
And to feel worthy of it. There's something on humans level, especially women. There's a psychological, aspect that just is, why wouldn't you choose the food that is the highest vibration? Why wouldn't you choose to stop doing the things that make you feel not great? So I give you absolute full permission to be your own best friend, and to put into your body and your being all those things that make you feel your best.
Hello, true health seeker. Have you ever thought about becoming a health coach? Do you love learning about nutrition and how we can shift our lifestyle and our diet so that we can gain optimal health and happiness and longevity? Do you love helping your friends and family to solve their health problems and to figure out what they can do to eat healthier? Are you interested in becoming someone who can grow their own business, support people in their success? Do you love helping people? You might be the perfect candidate to become a health coach. I highly recommend checking out the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. I just spent the last year in their health coaching certification program, and it really blew me away. It was so amazing. I learned over 100 dietary theories. I learned all about nutrition, but from a standpoint of how we can help people to shift their life and shift their lifestyle to gain true holistic health. I definitely recommend you check them out. You can Google Institute for Integrative Nutrition, or IIN, and give them a call, or you can go to learntruehealth.com/coach, and you can receive a free module of their training to check it out and see if it's something that you'd be interested in. Be sure to mention my name, Ashley James, and the Learn True Health podcast, because I made a deal with them that they will give you the best price possible. I highly recommend checking it out. It really changed my life to be in their program, and I'm such a big advocate that I wanted to spread this information. We need more health coaches. In fact, health coaching is the largest growing career right now in the health field. So many health coaches are getting in and helping people, because you can work in chiropractic offices, doctors' offices, you can work in hospitals, you can work online through Skype and help people around the world. You can become an author. You can go into the school system and help your local schools shift their programs to help children be healthier. You can go into senior centers and help them to shift their diet and lifestyle to best support them in their success and their health goals. There's so many different available options for you when you become a certified health coach. So check out IAN, check out the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, mention my name, get the best deal. Give them a call and they'll give you lots of free information and help you to see if this is the right move for you. Classes are starting soon. The next round of classes are starting at the end of the month. So you're going to want to call them now and check it out. And if you know anyone in your life who would be an amazing coach, please tell them about it. Being a health coach is so rewarding and you get to help so many people. Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com and one of our fantastic true health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program.